Well, I think the players have already accepted that they were in the wrong. They've broken those lockdown guidelines that are there. Um, I have to be very careful about being on my moral high horse about things that happen when we're not in camp with the team. We do have an issue in terms of the COVID guidelines and making sure that any player that comes in is as low a risk as possible in terms of the whole group. So we're having to monitor the players. They will have been tested today, possibly tomorrow. We've got to check for any further symptoms. So they obviously missed the game with Wales. If they're not able to be with us before Friday morning, then they would also miss the game with Belgium. So we can't give a definitive answer of when they'll be in because of all the things we're having to track. But that's the basic timeline for us. At the moment, they're all in consideration for later in the week. We just have to track what that happens and make sure that we're, as I said, protecting the whole group. Really, that's key because we have a unique bubble where you're bringing everybody from different environments. That's not going to be perfect because, as we've seen with some other nations, you can get positive tests, and the timelines on the incubation period are very complex. But we've got to manage that as securely as we can. Well, I don't think we can attribute what happens when players are the responsibility of their clubs to England. But what we did at the beginning of this week, we had a very good meeting, I felt, with all of the players, where we talked about the responsibility of being an England player, how the spotlight is different. When the story was in the paper earlier in the week, there was no mention of the clubs the players play for. They were cast as England players, even though they weren't with us. So that's the landscape we work in, and players have to realise that, whether they've got 1 cap or 50 caps. But if you're going into major tournaments and you have those sorts of incidents, then they can derail you. I've seen that in the past. That wasn't the case ahead of Russia. We went in a very calm state, and that allowed us to focus on our football. And I saw other teams not in that position, and it had a real detrimental effect to the way they were able to go into the tournament. And I've also talked before about the connection with the fans that we've worked very hard over the last 3 or 4 years to bring back. Key to that has been the contribution of players that have been with us. We've got 10 with us this time who were with us in Russia. They've done a lot of good work with us, with their clubs, within the communities, and they've played well and they've got results. Some of the younger ones haven't done that yet with England. They don't have that credit in the bank. They've got to prove themselves, and they need to remember that it is an honour to play for England, and all of these things, as we're selecting squads moving forward, do play a part in your thinking. So it's very difficult for me to stand here, and I'm not going to be too moralistic because we've all made errors in our lives. I'm the same. I've been a player. I've had nights out, so I'm not sitting here saying that I haven't done any of the things. We're living in really unique times with the COVID regulations, and everybody from politicians to businessmen to footballers are having, have erred within that field. So I think as a country, in terms of fighting the virus, we need to get a little bit back on track of working together.
It's been amazing. This week's been fantastic in terms of training, and it's been something where we've focused on these 3 games because they're 3 big games for us. It's something where I think since the last camp finished, we were looking forward to this one because, as I mentioned, the game comes thick and fast at international level now with everything that's going on in the world and with the international duty not happening for so long. It's something where the game's coming thick and fast. So it's enjoyable. It's something we're all looking forward to. But for me, it's just about learning off these players who are here. I'm able world-class players.
I knew because he's called me Gary before in a media conference a few years ago. And so I kind of knew, goodness me, we have coaches coming here who can speak 4 or 5 languages to get every nuance of that right. I've huge admiration for the way they deal with that, frankly. I've got O-level Spanish and French, but that's my limit. So I had no issue with that at all. I said to him, he's only one Gareth that he's got to get right, and he'll score all the goals for him this year. So from my point of view, not an issue at all.